Have you ever seen someone so entitled, so cruel that you prayed for instant justice on a seemingly normal flight from New York to London? One man thought his wealth gave him the right to destroy a young woman's dignity. He pushed her, mocked her, and tried to ruin her life at 30,000 feet. But he didn't know who was watching. He didn't know that the pilot, the crew, and the passengers were about to deliver a lesson he would never forget. Stay tuned, because the karma that hits this man is colder than the air outside. The boarding process for Flight 882 to London Heathrow was already testing everyone's patience. A heavy storm system off the coast of New York had delayed the inbound aircraft, leaving 300 passengers crammed into the gate area at JFK for 2 agonizing hours. The air was thick with humidity and the smell of stale coffee. Among the crowd stood Sarah Jenkins. At 22, Sarah was small in stature, clutching a worn-out backpack and a violin case that looked like it had seen better days. Her curly hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her eyes darted nervously round the terminal. This was her first international flight. In fact, it was the first time she had ever left the state. She had saved for 3 years, busking on street corners and working double shifts at a diner to accept a scholarship at a prestigious music conservatory in London. The violin in that case wasn't just an instrument. It was her future. Group 1 first-class passengers. "We are ready for you," the gate agent announced, her voice crackling over the intercom. A man in a bespoke navy suit, smelling expensive cologne and arrogance, pushed past a mother with a stroller to get to the front. This was Marcus Thorne. Marcus was a corporate liquidator, a man who made his living tearing apart companies and firing thousands of people without blinking. He held his phone to his ear, barking orders at some terrified assistant. "I don't care if it's illegal. Just get the merger done by Monday or you're fired." Marcus snapped, scanning his boarding pass without even looking at the flight attendant. Sarah, holding a group for boarding pass, watched him go. She felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach. She just wanted to get on the plane, stow her violin safely, and disappear into her seat. 40 minutes later, Sarah finally stepped onto the aircraft. The economy cabin was a sea of confusion, people shoving luggage into overhead bins, children crying, and the general chaos of travel. Sarah found her seat, 34B, a middle seat near the back. The overhead bins were already stuffed to the brim. Panic rose in her throat. She couldn't check the violin. The temperature changes in the cargo hold could warp the wood and snap the strings. It was a vintage instrument, a gift from her late grandfather, and replacing it was impossible. "Excuse me," she whispered to a flight attendant passing by. "Is there anywhere I can put this? It's very fragile." The flight attendant, a kind-faced woman named Elena, frowned sympathetically. "We are completely full back here, honey. Let me check the coat closet in first class. Sometimes there's space." Sarah exhaled, clutching the case. "Thank you, please." Elena nodded and motioned for Sarah to follow her up the aisle, past the rows of weary travelers toward the front of the plane. As they crossed the curtain into first class, the atmosphere changed. The air was cooler, and the seats were wide leather recliners. Champagne was already being poured. Elena opened the small coat closet near the cockpit. It was tight, but there was just enough room to slide the violin case in vertically, behind a few hanging suit jackets. "Perfect," Elena smiled. "It'll be safe here." Sarah felt tears of relief prick her eyes. "Thank you so much. Excuse me." A booming voice interrupted them. "What do you think you're doing?" Sarah froze. She turned to see Marcus Thorne sitting in seat 2A. He had lowered his noise-canceling headphones and was glaring at them with a look of pure disgust. "I'm just storing this passenger's instrument, Mr. Thorne," Elena said professionally. "There's no room in the overheads in economy." Marcus laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "That closet is for first-class jackets, not for trash from the back of the bus." Sarah shrank back. "I'm sorry, sir, it's very fragile. It won't take up much space." Marcus unbuckled his seat belt and stood up. He loomed over Sarah, his face reddening. "I paid $8,000 for the seat. That includes the closet space for my blazer. I don't want your dirty flea market guitar touching my Italian silk." "It's a violin," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't care if it's a Stradivarius," Marcus spat. "Get it out now." Elena stepped between them, her hand raised gently. "Sir, please take your seat. The closet is shared property of the airline, and the captain has authorized us to maximize storage. Your jacket is fine." Marcus's eyes narrowed. He looked at Sarah, taking in her worn sneakers and her nervous posture. He saw a target. He saw someone he could crush. "You think you can just waltz up here?" Marcus sneered, stepping closer to Sarah. "You people are all the same, always looking for a handout, always encroaching where you don't belong." He reached into the closet, grabbed the handle of the violin case and yanked it out. "No," Sarah screamed, reaching for it. Marcus didn't hand it to her. Instead, he held it out over the aisle, sneering. "Oops." He dropped it. The sound of the case hitting the floor wasn't loud, but the vibration that traveled through the floorboards felt like an earthquake to Sarah. She dropped to her knees, frantically unzipping the case. "Sir," Elena shouted, her professional demeanor cracking. "That is assault on personal property. Sit down immediately." Marcus just smirked, adjusting his cufflinks. It slipped. Maybe she should have checked it. Like the rest of the cattle, Sarah opened the case. The violin was intact, thank God, held safe by the velvet lining. But the bridge had snapped, and a long, ugly scratch ran down the varnish of the body. Sarah let out a sob, clutching the neck of the instrument. "Oh no," she wept. "Oh no, no, no." The first-class cabin had gone silent. Other passengers were looking over their seats, eyes wide. Marcus sat back down, picking up his champagne. "Get her out of here," he said dismissively to Elena. "She's disturbing my peace." Sarah looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. She felt a mixture of humiliation and a white-hot rage she had never felt before. But she was powerless. He was rich, powerful, and in first class. She was nobody. Elena knelt beside Sarah, helping her zip the case back up. "I am so sorry," she whispered fiercely. "Go back to your seat. I will handle this." Sarah stood up, her legs shaking. She clutched the damaged violin to her chest and turned to walk back to economy. As she passed Marcus, he didn't even look at her. He just turned up the volume on his movie. But Marcus had made a critical error. He assumed that because Sarah was quiet, she was weak. And he assumed that because he was in the air, the laws of decency didn't apply. He was wrong. Back in the galley, Elena picked up the interphone. Her hands were shaking, not with fear, but with anger. She dialed the cockpit. "Captain," she said, her voice steady, "we have a problem in Douai. A major problem. The plane hadn't even taken off yet, but the turbulence had already begun. And for Marcus Thorne, the storm was just getting started." The seatbelt sign pinged on with a hollow, synthetic chime, signaling that the aircraft was pushing back from the gate. In seat 34B, Sarah Jenkins was trembling so violently that the older man sitting next to her in 34C gently placed a hand on her arm. He was a large man with rough, calloused hands and a face weathered by years of outdoor work. His name was Jack, a retired steel worker, returning home to London to visit his grandchildren. "Easy now, lass," Jack said, his voice a low rumble. "Breathe, you're hyperventilating," Sarah gasped, clutching the neck of her damaged violin case as if it were a lifeline. "He broke it," she choked out, the reality of the situation crashing down on her. "My grandfather gave this to me. It's my whole life. I can't afford to fix it. I can't play it like this." Jack's expression darkened. He had seen the commotion from afar, but hearing the pain in the girl's voice made his jaw tighten. "That suit up front, the one who looked like he owns the world." Sarah nodded, wiping tears that refused to stop falling. "He called me trash. He just dropped it." "He's a bully," Jack said, his eyes hard, "and bullies only understand one thing. Don't you worry, karma has a way of finding people like him, especially at 30,000 feet up in the cockpit." The atmosphere was icy. Elena had briefed Captain James Miller while they were still at the gate. Captain Miller, a veteran pilot with 20 years of experience in the Air Force before joining the airline, gripped the throttle. "You're telling me he assaulted a passenger's property and verbally abused my crew?" Miller asked. His voice clipped. "Yes, Captain," Elena replied, her face pale. "He's drinking heavily already. He demanded a double scotch before we even pushed back. I wanted to deplane him, but we missed our slot," Miller finished. looking at the heavy rain lashing against the windshield. If we go back to the gate now to kick him off, we lose our takeoff window. We'll be grounded for another 3 hours, and the crew will time out. We have to go, Miller sighed, a sound of heavy resignation. He hated flying with problem passengers. It was a ticking time bomb. Cut him off, Elena. No more alcohol. If he so much as sneezes wrong, I want to know. We'll have authorities waiting at Heathrow. Understood, Captain. As the massive engines roared to life and the plane barreled down the runway, lifting into the gray stormy sky, Marcus Thorne was already celebrating his victory. He reclined his leather seat, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. He felt powerful. He had asserted his dominance over the girl, over the flight attendant, over everyone. To Marcus, people like Sarah were irrelevant. Background noise in the movie of his life. He pulled out his laptop to check his stock portfolio. Completely unbothered by the devastation he had caused a few rows behind him. But the peace was short-lived. About an hour into the flight, the turbulence hit. It wasn't just bumps. It was the kind of air pocket drops that made your stomach lurch into your throat. The plane shook violently. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign, the intercom announced. Please return to your seats. Elena walked through the first-class cabin, checking belts. She stopped at row 2. Mr. Thorne, I need you to put your laptop away and fasten your seatbelt, she said firmly. Marcus didn't look up. I'm working. Go away, sir. It's for your safety. The turbulence is severe. Marcus slammed his laptop shut, the noise startling the woman across the aisle. You are obsessed with me, aren't you? First, you try to put that garbage in my closet, and now you're harassing me about a seatbelt. Do you know who I am? I don't care who you are. Sir, I care about safety regulations. Elena's voice was shaking, but she stood her ground. Marcus unbuckled his belt entirely, standing up in the swaying cabin. The plane dropped suddenly, and he stumbled, grabbing the overhead bin for support. Sit down, Elena shouted, bracing herself against the seat. I need a refill, Marcus snarled, ignoring gravity. He thrust his empty glass at her. Get me another scotch now. I cannot serve you alcohol, sir. You are intoxicated, and the seat belt sign is on. The silence that followed was deafening, even over the roar of the engines. Marcus stared at her, his eyes bloodshot and wide with disbelief. No one said no to Marcus Thorne. You're cutting me off, he whispered menacingly. Yes, Elena said. Please sit down. Marcus sat, but not because he wanted to. Another jolt of turbulence threw him back into his leather chair. He buckled the belt aggressively, his knuckles white. You'll regret this, he hissed, pointing a finger at her. I'm going to have your job. I'm going to have your pension. You'll be serving coffee at a gas station by next week. Elena walked away, her heart pounding in her chest. She went to the galley and called the cockpit again. Captain, he's escalating. He's threatening the crew. Keep your distance, Elena. Captain Miller's voice came through the headset, tight with tension. We are over the Atlantic now. We are 3 hours from anywhere. Don't engage him. Back in economy. Sarah was trying to sleep, but her mind was racing. She opened the case on her lap, running her fingers over the scratch on the violin. It felt like a scar on her own skin. Can it be fixed? Jack asked quietly. The bridge is snapped, Sarah whispered. The sound post inside might be collapsed. It will cost thousands. I have $40 in my bank account. Jack shook his head, looking around the cabin. He saw the faces of other passengers, a young couple holding hands, a mother rocking a baby, a businessman typing on a tablet. They were all just people trying to get somewhere. They were a community, bound together by this metal tube in the sky. And up front, there was a predator. Jack had a feeling that the turbulence outside was nothing compared to what was brewing inside the plane. He looked at Sarah's tear-streaked face and made a silent vow. If that man comes near her again, Jack thought, clenching his fists, I don't care about the laws. I'm stopping him. As the flight leveled out and the seatbelt sign flicked off, the cabin settled into an uneasy calm. The lights were dimmed for the overnight portion of the flight. Most people closed their eyes, but Marcus Thorne didn't sleep. He sat in the dark, stewing in his rage. The alcohol was still coursing through his system, fueling his paranoia and entitlement. He felt slighted, he felt disrespected, and in his twisted mind, he decided that the source of all his problems wasn't his own behavior. It was the girl with the cheap violin. He unbuckled his seatbelt. He stood up. The first-class cabin was asleep. Elena was in the galley, preparing for the mid-flight service. Marcus stepped into the aisle. He didn't head for the lavatory. He turned around and looked toward the curtain that separated the classes. He began to walk toward economy. The curtain separating first class from economy parted with a soft swoosh. Marcus Thorne stepped through. The dim blue mood lighting cast long, eerie shadows across his face. He had loosened his tie and his hair was disheveled. He looked less like a corporate executive and more like a man unraveling. The economy cabin was quiet. Most passengers were asleep, wearing neck pillows and eye masks. The only sound was the steady hum of the jet engines and the occasional rustle of a blanket. Marcus walked down the narrow aisle, his expensive leather shoes silent on the carpet. He scanned the seat numbers, his eyes narrowing. 30, 31, 32. He spotted her in row 34. Sarah was asleep, her head resting against the window. The violin case clutched tightly in her arms like a teddy bear. Marcus stopped. He loomed over the row, swaying slightly from the alcohol and the motion of the plane. A dark, ugly thought formed in his mind. He wanted to see her suffer. He wanted to make sure she knew her place. "Hey," he said, his voice loud in the quiet cabin. Sarah didn't stir. "Hey," Marcus shouted, kicking the leg of her seat. Sarah jolted awake, gasping. She looked up, disoriented, and saw the silhouette of the man who had tormented her. Her eyes went wide with terror. "You." Marcus slurred, pointing a shaking finger at her. "You think you're special. Crying to the stewardess, getting me cut off, sir." Jack, sitting next to Sarah, woke up instantly. He sat up straighter, blocking Sarah with his shoulder. "What's the problem here?" "Shut up, old man," Marcus snapped. "I'm talking to the little thief." Marcus leaned over Jack, invading Sarah's personal space. The smell of scotch was overpowering. "You owe me an apology. You ruined my flight. Please." Sarah whimpered, shrinking into the corner of her seat. "Please leave me alone." "Leave you alone?" Marcus laughed, a cruel, barking sound. "I should have thrown that piece of junk out the airlock." He reached out and grabbed the handle of the violin case again. "Let go," Sarah screamed, panic seizing her. "Let go of it," Marcus roared, yanking hard. "Hey," Jack shouted, grabbing Marcus's wrist. "Back off, pal." Marcus, fueled by blind rage, didn't back down. He used his free hand to shove Jack's face back. "Don't touch me, you peasant." The commotion woke up the surrounding rows. People were pulling off headphones, staring in shock. "Let go of her," a woman across the aisle yelled. Marcus ignored them. He wrenched the violin case from Sarah's grip. She lunged for it, but he was stronger. He held it up high, looking like he was about to smash it over the back of the seat. "No, please." Sarah begged, tears streaming down her face again. "Don't break it, please." "This," Marcus sneered, "this is what you care about. This is garbage." He didn't smash it. Instead, he did something worse. He opened the overhead bin above row 34, which was packed with hard-shell suitcases. With a grunt of effort, he shoved the violin case inside, jamming it violently against the heavy luggage. Hearing the wood crunch further, then he grabbed a heavy-duty metal water bottle from a passenger's tray table. "You want to cry?" Marcus hissed. He turned back to Sarah, raising the heavy metal bottle. The entire section of the plane gasped. "Sir, stop!" Elena came running down the aisle, having heard the screaming. But she was too far away. Marcus swung the bottle. He didn't aim for the violin this time. He aimed for Sarah. It wasn't a lethal blow, but it was vicious. The metal bottle connected with Sarah's shoulder as she turned to protect her face. The sound of metal hitting bone echoed through the cabin, a sickening thud. Sarah cried out in sharp, agonizing pain, clutching her shoulder and curling into a ball. "That's for disrespecting me," Marcus screamed, raising the bottle again. And then the flight froze. It wasn't a figure of speech. It felt as if time itself stopped. The collective shock of 300 people transformed instantly into collective action. Jack didn't think. He didn't calculate. He unbuckled his seat belt and launched himself out of his seat. He tackled Marcus into the aisle. They crashed to the floor. Marcus, surprised and unbalanced, went down hard. But Marcus was younger and fueled by adrenaline. He kicked Jack in the chest, scrambling back to his feet, swinging the bottle wildly. "Stay back." Marcus yelled, his eyes wild. "I'll kill you all." He stood in the middle of the aisle, panting, holding the metal bottle like a weapon. Blood was trickling from a cut on his lip where he had hit the floor. Sarah was sobbing in her seat, unable to move her arm. Suddenly, a voice cut through the chaos. It was calm, authoritative, and terrifyingly low. "Drop the weapon now." 3 rows behind Marcus, a tall man in a gray hoodie stood up. He had been sleeping for most of the flight, unnoticed. He stepped into the aisle. He wasn't big like a bodybuilder, but he moved with a fluid, dangerous grace. Marcus spun around. "Sit down, loser, or you're next." The man in the hoodie didn't flinch. He walked toward Marcus, hands open, palms showing. "I said drop it." "Who do you think you are?" Marcus sneered, raising the bottle to strike. The man moved. It was a blur of motion, too fast for the passengers to track. He stepped inside Marcus's swing, deflected the arm, and delivered a precise, open palm strike to Marcus's solar plexus. Marcus's eyes bulged. The air left his lungs. He doubled over. The man twisted Marcus's arm behind his back, forcing him to his knees, and kicked the legs out from under him. In 3 seconds, Marcus Thorne was pinned face down on the aisle carpet. His arm bent at a painful angle. "I am Federal Air Marshal David Cole," the man said, his voice ringing out clearly. "You are under arrest for assault and interfering with a flight crew." The cabin erupted, not with applause, but with a release of tension so palpable it felt like a wave. "Elena Marshall," Cole barked, "get me the restraints now." Elena rushed forward with plastic flex cuffs. Marcus was thrashing, screaming obscenities into the carpet. "You can't do this. Do you know who my lawyers are? I'll sue you. I'll buy this airline and fire you all." "You have the right to remain silent," Cole said, tightening the cuffs until they clicked. "I suggest you use it." Cole hauled Marcus to his feet. Marcus looked around, expecting to see fear in the passenger's eyes. Instead, he saw 300 phones raised, recording him. He saw disgust. He saw judgment. "Is the girl okay?" Cole asked, looking past Marcus to seat 34B. Jack was helping Sarah sit up. She was holding her shoulder, her face pale with shock. "I think my collarbone is broken," she whispered. "Captain Elena," said into the inner phone, her voice trembling with rage, "we have a medical emergency. Passenger in 34B has been assaulted. Suspect is in custody." The intercom clicked on almost immediately. Captain Miller's voice was no longer resigned. It was cold steel. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. We are declaring an emergency. We are diverting immediately to Gander, Newfoundland. We will be on the ground in 40 minutes. And to the man who just assaulted my passenger, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police will be waiting for you." The plane banked hard to the left, the engines roaring as they changed course. The flight to London was over, but for Marcus Thorne, the nightmare was just beginning. He thought he was untouchable. He thought his money was a shield. But he was about to learn that when you strike an innocent person at 30,000 feet, there is nowhere to run. The descent into Gander, Newfoundland was rough. The storm that had delayed them in New York had stretched its fingers north, and the winds buffeted the large aircraft as if it were a paper toy. But inside the cabin, the atmosphere was frozen in a heavy, expectant silence. Marcus Thorne sat in the jump seat near the galley, hands cuffed behind his back, strapped in next to the air marshal. He had stopped screaming, resorting instead to a low, venomous muttering. He glared at every passenger who dared to look at him, his eyes promising retribution that he no longer had the power to deliver. In row 34, the mood was somber. Elena, the flight attendant, had brought ice packs and a rudimentary sling for Sarah. Sarah sat pale and shivering, shock settling into her bones. The pain in her shoulder was a dull, throbbing fire, but the pain in her heart was sharper. She kept looking at the overhead bin where her violin, her grandfather's legacy, lay crushed. "We're almost there, kid," Jack whispered, his own hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline of the tackle. "You're going to be okay." "He ruined everything," Sarah whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. I'm going to miss my orientation. I don't have an instrument. I'm nobody. You are not nobody, Jack said firmly. Look around you. Sarah lifted her head. Across the aisle, passengers were looking at her, not with pity, but with solidarity. A young woman passed a pack of tissues. A man rose up, sent back a sealed bottle of water. They were a community now, forged by the trauma of witnessing cruelty. The landing gear deployed with a heavy clunk. The wheels screeched against the wet tarmac, and the plane shuddered as the thrust reversers roared. As the aircraft slowed and turned toward the terminal, the captain's voice came over the intercom. One last time, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Ganda. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Local authorities are boarding the aircraft immediately to remove the security threat. Once he is removed, paramedics will board for the injured passenger. Thank you for your incredible patience and cooperation. The plane came to a halt. The fastened seatbelt sign pinged off, but nobody moved. Nobody reached for a bag. The silence was absolute. The forward door opened. The cold Canadian air rushed in, smelling of rain and pine. Two officers from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, stepped onto the plane. They were imposing figures in dark uniforms, their faces grim. Air Marshal Cole stood up and unbuckled Marcus. He's all yours. Marcus saw the Canadian uniforms and sneered. Finally, get these cuffs off me. I am an American citizen, and I demand to speak to the consulate. I've been kidnapped by this incompetent crew. The lead officer, a tall sergeant named Roberts, didn't blink. He grabbed Marcus's arm with a grip like iron. Marcus Thorne. That's Mr. Thorne to you. You are under arrest for aggravated assault, endangering the safety of an aircraft, and causing a disturbance, Sergeant Roberts recited calmly. You are not in America, sir. You are in Canada, and we take aviation safety very seriously. You have no jurisdiction. Marcus spat as they hauled him toward the door. I'll buy your department. I'll sue you for every penny. As they dragged him down the aisle of first class, Marcus looked for allies. He looked at the wealthy passengers he had sat with earlier, but they all turned their heads away. One woman, the one he had bragged to about his merger, held up her phone and snapped a photo of him in cuffs. Rot in hell, Marcus, she said quietly as Marcus was shoved out the door and onto the jet bridge. A spontaneous sound erupted from the back of the plane. It started as a slow clap from row 34, initiated by Jack. Then it spread. Row 30, row 20, first class. Within seconds, the entire plane was applauding. It wasn't a celebration of joy. It was the thunderous sound of justice. Next, the paramedics boarded. They moved quickly to row 34 with profound tenderness. They helped Sarah up. We're going to take you to the local hospital, honey. Let's get that shoulder checked out. My violin, Sarah whispered, pointing to the bin. Jack stood up. I'll get it. I'll bring it to you. I promise. Sarah nodded weakly as she was led off the plane. As she passed the galley, Elena grabbed her hand and squeezed it. I have your contact info, Sarah. This isn't over. We will fix this. Sarah stepped off the plane into the unknown, broken and bruised. But what she didn't know was that while she was in the air, the digital world on the ground had already ignited. The holding cell at the Gander detachment of the RCMP was a stark contrast to the first-class cabin. It was cold, smelling of bleach and concrete. Marcus Thorne sat on a metal bench, his expensive suit wrinkled, his time missing, confiscated as a safety risk. He was pacing, his rage now mixing with a creeping sense of dread. He had been allowed one phone call. He had called his personal lawyer in New York, a man named Sterling. Sterling, who usually made problems disappear with a checkbook. Sterling, get me out of here. Marcus barked into the receiver. I'm in some backwater town in Canada. They're charging me with assault. It's a shakedown, Marcus. Sterling's voice sounded different, strained. It's not just an assault charge. What are you talking about? It's her word against mine. She's a nobody. Just pay her off. Marcus, haven't you seen it? Seen what? The video. Marcus froze. What video? Someone on the plane was live streaming. A tech vlogger named Jason K. He has for million subscribers. He filmed the whole thing. The argument, the violin, the metal bottle, everything. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. So what? It's just a video. It has 30 million views in 2 hours. Marcus, it's trending #1 worldwide on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. The hashtag is #Ramonstarenfirsks. Marcus gripped the phone tighter. Fix it. Take it down, sue the platform. I can't, Sterling said, his voice dropping to a whisper. It's too big. And Marcus, there's more. What could possibly be worse? The board of directors just held an emergency meeting. They saw the video. They saw you call the girl trash and hit her. I make them millions, Marcus screamed. They need me. They invoked the morality clause in your contract, Marcus, effective immediately. You are terminated. They are issuing a press release in 10 minutes, distancing themselves from you. You're out, and because it's for cause, you lose your severance, you lose your stock options, you lose everything. Marcus dropped the receiver. It swung by its metal cord, hitting the wall with a dull clang. He sank onto the bench, terminated. Penniless. It wasn't possible. He was Marcus Thorne. Meanwhile, at the James Peyton Memorial Regional Health Center, Sarah was sitting on a sterile bed, her arm in a sling. The x-rays had confirmed a hairline fracture in her collarbone and severe bruising. It was painful, but it would heal. The door opened and Jack walked in, carrying the battered violin case. Elena was with him. How are you holding up? Elena asked softly. I'm okay, Sarah said, though her voice was hollow. I don't know what to do. I missed my connecting flight. I missed the orientation. I don't have the money for a new ticket, let alone a new violin. About that, Elena said, pulling out her phone. You need to see this. She turned the screen towards Sarah. It was a GoFundMe page. The title read, Justice for Sarah, the violinist from Flight 882. It had been created by the tech vlogger Jason K., who had been sitting 3 rows behind Sarah. The description detailed the assault and the destruction of the instrument. Look at the number, Elena said. Sarah squinted. Her eyes went wide. $145,000 raised of $10,000 goal. What? Sarah gasped. Is this real? It's very real, Elena smiled, tears in her eyes. People are angry. Sarah, but more than that, they want to help. Famous musicians are sharing it. Even the London Conservatory tweeted that they are holding your spot and arranging a private car to pick you up whenever you arrive. Sarah covered her mouth with her good hand, sobbing. I don't understand why. Because you didn't deserve that, Jack said, his voice gruff with emotion. And because the world saw what happened, that man tried to break you instead. He just showed the world how strong you are. Back in the jail cell, an officer walked in. Mr. Thorne, the officer said coldly. Your lawyer called back. He's resigning as your counsel due to a conflict of interest. Marcus looked up, his eyes hollow. What conflict? Apparently, his daughter plays the violin, the officer said with a dry smirk. You're on your own. Your bail hearing is in the morning. I suggest you get comfortable. The officer slammed the heavy steel door shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Marcus Thorne, the man who flew above everyone, was now in a cage. But the real twist, the one that would truly destroy him, was still to come. The internet sleuths hadn't just watched the video. They had started digging into his past. And what they were finding was about to turn his assault charge into a federal indictment. That would put him away for a very, very long time. As Marcus Thorne sat in the holding cell, he thought he had hit rock bottom. He was wrong. While he was obsessing over his lost job, a global network of internet sleuths had been working tirelessly. The viral video of his outburst hadn't just reached music lovers. It had reached the desks of the SEC and the Department of Justice. For years, Marcus had been liquidating companies by skimming millions off the top through offshore shell accounts. He had been careful, hiding behind a wall of expensive lawyers and complex digital trails. But his public infamy brought a level of scrutiny he hadn't prepared for. A former employee, seeing Marcus's face plastered across every news outlet, finally felt safe enough to come forward. By 3 a.m., a digital paper trail was being unspooled that linked Marcus to a massive embezzlement scheme. The assault on Flight 882 was the spark, but the resulting fire was burning down his entire empire. By morning, the RCMP sergeant returned to Marcus's cell. He wasn't alone. He was accompanied by two stern men in suits. "Mr. Thorne," the sergeant said, "these gentlemen are from the FBI. They've been looking for you for a long time. It seems your merger in New York involved a lot of money that didn't belong to you." Marcus's face went gray. I have a bail hearing for the assault." "The assault is the least of your worries now," one of the FBI agents said. "We have a warrant for your arrest on 18 counts of wire fraud and money laundering. Your assets have been frozen. You won't be hiring any fancy lawyers today. You'll be assigned a public defender." The man who had mocked Sarah for her cheap violin was now officially penniless. Meanwhile, Sarah was being discharged from the hospital. A crowd of locals had gathered outside, not to gawk but to offer support. The owner of a local music shop in Gander stepped forward, holding a case. "Sarah," the man said, his voice thick with Newfoundland hospitality, "we heard what happened. This isn't the violin you lost, but it's a 1920s French workshop piece. It's been in my shop for years. Waiting for the right hands, we want you to have it. Consider it a gift from the people of Ganda." Sarah opened the case. The instrument inside glowed with a deep, honey-colored varnish. She touched the strings, and even with her injured shoulder, she could feel the soul of the wood. She wept not out of sadness this time, but out of a profound realization that for every Marcus Thorne in the world, there were 1,000 people like these. The transition from the chaos of Flight 88, 82 to the prestigious halls of the London Royal College of Music felt to Sarah Jenkins like emerging from a dark, suffocating tunnel into a field of blinding light. The fracture in her collarbone had healed over the course of 8 grueling weeks, a period spent in a small, sun-drenched flat in South Kensington, provided by the conservatory's emergency housing fund. But while the bone had knit itself back together, the mental scars were slower to fade. For the first month, Sarah couldn't even look at a violin without her hand shaking. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the sickening thud of the metal bottle hitting her shoulder and saw the wild, bloodshot eyes of Marcus Thorne. However, the world hadn't forgotten her. The GoFundMe campaign, which had started as a small gesture by Jason Kay, the tech vlogger from Row 37, had exploded far beyond anyone's expectations. It didn't stop at 145,000. By the time the campaign was closed, people from 64 countries had donated over $420,000. Sarah wasn't just a victim. She had become a global symbol for dignity in the face of entitlement. With the funds, Sarah did something that surprised everyone. She didn't buy a Ferrari or a luxury penthouse. After paying for her medical bills and a top-tier physical therapist, she established the Row 34 Foundation. It was a scholarship fund designed to help underprivileged young musicians from minority backgrounds afford the high costs of touring and instrument insurance. She knew better than anyone that a single broken bridge could end a career before it started. As for the violin, the instrument gifted to her by the people of Uganda became her soulmate. It had a darker, more resonant tone than her grandfather's original, a voice that seemed to carry the weight of the North Atlantic gales and the warmth of the people who had rescued her. While Sarah was finding her voice, Marcus Thorne was losing his. The legal system in both Canada and the United States moved with a glacial but terrifying inevitability. Because the crimes occurred over international waters on a U.S.-registered carrier, the Department of Justice took the lead. The trial was a media circus. Marcus, refusing to accept the public defender and having his private funds frozen due to the embezzlement investigation, tried to represent himself for the first 3 weeks. It was a disaster. He stood in the courtroom, still dressed in a suit that was now 3 sizes too big. He shouted about his rights and the lack of respect from the lower classes. The prosecution's star witness wasn't Sarah. It was the collective evidence of 300 smartphones. They played the video from Flight 882 on a giant projector screen in the courtroom. The jury watched in stony silence as Marcus loomed over a terrified girl, mocking her poverty and swinging that heavy metal bottle. But the killing blow came when the prosecution played the audio from the black box cockpit voice recorder, which had captured his screams of "Do you know who I am?" echoing through the galley. The judge, a formidable woman named Margaret Vans, didn't hold back during sentencing. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice echoing through the hushed courtroom, You have spent your life believing that people are commodities to be liquidated. You viewed a young woman's dreams as trash because they didn't come with a price tag. You didn't just assault a person, you assaulted the very idea of human decency. In a sky meant for everyone, you tried to claim a throne. Today, that throne is gone. Marcus was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison for the assault and endangering an aircraft, to be served consecutively with a 12-year sentence for the multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme that his viral infamy had uncovered. He was led out of the courtroom in shackles, the sound of the metal chains clinking against the floor, a hollow, rhythmic percussion. That would be the only music he'd hear for a very long time. 6 months to the day after Flight 882 made its emergency landing in the Canadian wilderness, the Royal Albert Hall was sold out. It was the annual Rising Stars Gala, and the atmosphere was electric. In the wings of the stage, Sarah stood alone, clutching the Gander violin. Her breath was shallow. This was it, the moment she had worked for since she was 6 years old. Basking in the rain for quarters. "You ready, Sarah?" a familiar voice asked. She turned to see Elena, the flight attendant. Elena was no longer in her uniform. She was wearing a stunning emerald green gown. Beside her stood Jack, the retired steel worker, looking slightly uncomfortable but immensely proud in a stiff new tuxedo. They had flown in first class this time, courtesy of the airline. As a gesture of apology to see her play, "I'm terrified," Sarah admitted, her fingers dancing nervously over the strings. Jack stepped forward and placed a heavy, reassuring hand on her good shoulder. "Last time you survived a monster at 30,000 feet. This is just a room full of people who want to hear a miracle. You've already won." Sarah smiled, and for the first time, the tension left her body. The lights in the hall dimmed, the conductor signaled, and Sarah stepped out onto the stage. The applause was deafening. It lasted for nearly 3 minutes before she even lifted her bow. She looked out into the sea of faces, people of every race, every age, every background. She saw the tech vlogger Jason Kay in the 4th row, his camera off for once, just nodding at her. She tucked the violin under her chin. She closed her eyes and thought of the cold air in Gander. She thought of the kindness of strangers. She thought of the way the entire flight had frozen in defense of a girl they didn't even know. She began to play. It wasn't a classical piece by Mozart or Bach. It was an original composition she had titled "The Passenger." It started with a low, dissonant vibration, mimicking the hum of jet engines and the tension of a storm. The music grew jagged and sharp, representing the confrontation, the fear, and the sudden, violent impact. The audience sat in a trance, some were weeping openly. Then the melody shifted. It became a soaring, triumphant anthem. It was the sound of a community rising. It was the sound of justice. The notes climbed higher and higher, reaching toward the ceiling of the great hall, pure and unbroken, as the final note echoed into the rafters and faded into a profound, respectful silence. Sarah kept her bow raised. The silence held for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and then the room exploded. It wasn't just a standing ovation, it was a roar of human spirit. In a federal correctional facility in Pennsylvania, the lights were being dimmed for the night. Marcus Thorne sat on his thin mattress, staring at a concrete wall. He had traded his Italian silk for a rough cotton blend. He had traded his scotch for lukewarm water in a plastic cup. He could hear the distant sound of a television in the guard's station. A news report was showing clips of the performance at the Royal Albert Hall. He caught a glimpse of Sarah, radiant, powerful, and free. He saw the trash he had tried to break, now being hailed as a once-in-a-generation genius. He reached out to change the channel, but a hand stopped him. A large inmate, a man who had heard what Marcus was in for, leaned over him. "Leave it on." The man growled, "I like the music. It's got heart, something you wouldn't know anything about." Marcus pulled his hand back, shrinking into the corner of his cell. He was a man who had once commanded rooms and moved markets with a whisper. Now he was just a number in a silent room, listening to the music of the girl he couldn't stop. Sarah's journey had started with a nightmare on a plane, but it ended with a song that would live forever. The flight was over, the luggage had been claimed, and the passenger who tried to beat the world into submission had finally been grounded for good. The truth had come out at 30,000 feet. No matter how high you fly, you can never escape the gravity of your own actions. This story is a testament to the fact that your background or the color of your skin does not define your worth. Your character does. Marcus Thorne had all the money in the world, but he was bankrupt of soul. Sarah had nothing but a violin and a dream, and she ended up with the world at her feet. If you think Marcus got exactly what he deserved, leave a heck yes in the comments. We want to see how many people stand for justice. If this story moved you, please share it. Bullying and entitlement thrive in silence, but they wither when we speak up for one another. Finally, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We bring you the most intense, heart-pounding stories of karma and real-life drama every week. Don't miss the next one. You never know whose life might be changed by a single moment of truth. Thanks for watching, and keep playing your own music, no matter who tries to stop you. Would you like me to create a set of dramatic chapter titles or thumbnail text ideas to help you organize this for your video production?